Welcome to SDHC's Health and Wellbeing podcast. Before we begin, we want to emphasise that the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date content, it is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis or treatment. Always seek the guidance of your doctor or other qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. Remember, your health and well-being are invaluable, so prioritise consulting with a medical professional for your personalised care. Hi everybody, you're listening to the Health and Wellbeing podcast from South Downs Health and Care with your host, Dr. Nick Harvey. The purpose of this show is to help people understand how they can help themselves and others with their health and wellbeing. Every episode, I interview an expert to understand the latest evidence and advice on how to improve your own health and help others. This month, I welcome Jason Newbery to discuss the topic of supporting health and wellbeing through activity. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks, Nick.
So Jason Newbery is a dedicated sports performance coach specialising in triathletes, runners, cyclists and functional fitness athletes. As the founder of Then We Run, established 3 years ago, he caters to a wide range of athletes, from those aiming to compete their first races to those striving to win age group competitions or receive significant performance milestones, such as a 4-hour marathon. With a background of PE teaching, Jason's journey into endurance sports is a compelling narrative. His transformation from a non-running background to an accomplished endurance athlete is detailed in his article, which is really inspiring, about how to change your life in thousands of difficult steps, published on Medium. So, thanks very much, Jason, for joining us. I'm fascinated to learn a bit more about your journey, as well as what you're doing with other people. And before we hit record on this, you were telling me about your son and a bit about your family and how actually this job fits around your life. So I'm interested to hear a little bit about that before we dive into how you support others.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. And firstly, thanks for having me. I mean, I think one of the things of endurance athletes is that they tend to listen to a lot of podcasts. It's a nice way to while away the hours when you're on the bike or running or whatever. And I didn't actually think I'd ever be sitting on a podcast on this side. So thank you for having me and thanks for the nice introduction. Yeah. And my background is obviously, as you said, was a PE teacher. And that was something I sort of thought, well, I'll do my degree and go off and get a career in PE teaching, the way we'll go. And part of that then ended up with me signing up to do a marathon and quite an unlikely person to have done so at that point, despite the PE teaching aspect of my life. And then after our son was born, my wife's also a PE teacher. So we were trying to balance both working in school 6 days a week with looking after our son and so on. And I had the sort of crazy idea of, well, what if I stopped working and went and did a master's degree and studied part-time, and I'll do the home stuff with him until he goes off to school. And that was fine. And I did a 2-year part-time master's degree whilst also doing the home dad stuff. And then just as I'd enrolled to do a PhD, and I was like, oh, this is quite nice, I'm going to carry on, I'll do a PhD and hopefully probably go into some lecturing. It became clear that our son had some more additional challenges. So he has autism, and his journey into education was then interrupted by COVID and so on. And he really struggled with that transition. So I now homeschool him full time. So I've ended up going from teaching classes of 25 to 30 to teaching a class of 1 and having to learn primary school maths and English again. So yeah, it's that aspect of fitting in other things I'd like to do in terms of endurance sports and my own sort of physical challenges. It's something that still resonates with me, even though I'm self-employed, because I spent so long in what's effectively a full-time job of homeschooling. And then once it was clear I was going to be doing that, and that was the best thing for our family, it was, well, how can I still stay involved in coaching? And that led to setting up a coaching business of working with runners and triathletes and so on, which I'm then able to sort of manage around home commitments and so on. So, I suppose that's how I end up here, having thought when I graduated, maybe it was 15 years ago, that I'd just be a PE teacher for the next 40, 50 years, and that was it. But it's funny how things switch around like that and get you places.
So you're now, a small business owner.
Yeah, that part of it was, I think that's probably the hardest part of the job, making sure that the paperwork is correct. That's always the dreaded moment every year of, right, okay, have I kept every detail that I need to keep and so on. And that's, self-employment is a whole different world that I wasn't quite sure I wanted to venture into, but we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose it's one of those necessities that you just get done, don't you? But it's not pleasant. I'm interested then as well, before we leap on to how you help others keep fit. You've clearly got a really busy diary. You're supporting your son, which must be really challenging for you through homeschooling. You're running a small business and supporting other people to keep fit. So how are you doing it yourself?
I don't know. I think when I wrote the article that you referenced earlier, it came from a place of recognition of the changes that I'd gone through as a person, really, through endurance sport, and reflecting back on me as an 18, 19-year-old who really wasn't ready for the challenges of life and so on. When I first left school, I enrolled to do physiotherapy and did that for a year and was due to go on my first placement. And the first placement was going to be on the cystic fibrosis ward. And I said, I can't do that. I'm not mentally mature enough to go and help people who are struggling like that. So anyway, I'll go and work in the secondary school teaching PE. That seems like it's going to be much easier. But once I got into endurance sports, I started to develop this almost a self-belief, but also a willingness to challenge myself. And when you're out running for 4 hours, you will spend time thinking, I can't do this. There's no way I can physically do this. I'm tired. I just want to stop. This doesn't matter and whatever. And that starts to seep into everyday life when you overcome those challenges, I think. And so now, anyone who's listening who knows somebody with autism or has interactions with people with autism will know that one of the biggest challenges is patience. You have to be incredibly patient when there are challenging behaviors or so on. And I'm probably, I've said 30 years ago, I'm one of the least patient people I know. I'm not patient at all. But you will learn to be patient if you're going to run 26 miles, because if you're not, you won't succeed. And I think that's where I see this, the word journey gets used, and I think X Factor and so on probably hijacked the word journey and so on. And it becomes a bit of a cliche, but it was a change in me as a person that came from doing something I thought I would never be able to do and learning whilst I was doing it that there were things and behaviors I didn't think I could ever show, like being patient and being calm, that ability to calm your mind when it starts the disaster plan and you're hearing all these voices, you can't, this is too hard or whatever. And that's, that to me just feeds into everyday life, the discipline that's necessary, the planning, the organization that comes from making things work and making things fit in. I think I learned a lot of those from being in endurance sport, and that's...
You've just kind of hit me in the face with a bit of a light bulb listening to you, because what I'm almost hearing is, and you see it every day with people who are parents with children with various challenges, that it's just their love that gets them through building the patience and the routines and things like that to support their child. And it's all inspiring to see. And I suppose the light bulb moment for me just then was, it's not that different for us, is it? You're talking about being patient with yourself. So love yourself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's the thing that people can get from any challenge. It may be an endurance sports challenge. It may be a sporting challenge. It may be any challenge in life, learning a musical instrument or whatever. I think there is a lesson in learning that if you start to think, actually, I did that. That came from me being able to persevere and to endure and to stick with it. And you're going to get loads of help along the way. There's no way anybody's going to achieve anything without other people helping them. But we also get that pride in, actually, I can do that. And I can achieve things. You get certainly a respect for yourself, I think, that is not that easy to achieve, because we look on social media and we look at what everyone else is achieving and what they're doing, and we think, oh, that's amazing, that's great. You know, I could never do that. But if you can actually build to that point where you're doing it, I think you will find a self-respect and a pride in what you can do. And then you're able to share that with others, because you're able to show them that they can do the same thing. And that's, when we got the introduction and what you emailed to say about being a guest on the podcast, I listened to the first two that were released, which I thought, I'd like to get a feel for what the podcast is like and so on. And I thought the first two, because I've heard the first two, the guests were obviously excellent and so knowledgeable. And I had this massive feeling of imposter syndrome of, well, I mean, they're two deep experts in their field coming in and talking and sharing this amazing, you know, I've learned so much just listening to them. I don't think I've got anything to say which is anywhere near as interesting or as thought provoking as that. So I was like, oh, maybe I should just cancel. Maybe I should, I didn't really got anything to say. And then I thought, well, if there's one person who listened to this and thinks, well, actually, I could do that then. If he's done that, and honestly, I am not, you know, in any way dramatically special or amazing. Yeah. But if they can listen and say, well, that's the sort of person that could run a marathon, that'll be fine. It'll have been worth it. So to come in and you know, it's been nice to meet you and have a chat and stuff. But, you know, that was why I didn't then cancel, because that's, you know, that's how I started, as, you know, in that article. It was someone I worked with who inspired me to start marathon running. And if I'm able to have one person do that, you know, that'll be plenty. That'll be fine.
Thanks for sharing that. I think we all have this imposter syndrome to a degree, don't we? And not to belittle, you know, yours. I think it's also really important to recognize that you've kind of overcome a barrier just to turn up. And that's the same with anyone who just wants to start exercising, whatever, isn't it? It's about kind of going, let's just do that first step. Let's, you know, what's the worst that can happen?
Absolutely. That, I think one of the biggest problems I've ever had with when I set up the business was, what do I call myself? You know, I could just say triathlon coach or running coach or whatever. But naturally I've ended up also coaching like functional fitness sports. So there's a sport which is currently really big, which is called high rocks, which is a really growing area of sort of physical activity and sport. So I thought, well, I suppose I could say performance coach, but then I don't really like the term, because I think when people think of performance coach, that instantly says to people, oh, well, he's not for me, because there must be something about performance. And it really, you know, that isn't how I think about physical activity or people being involved in sport. Performance to me, to other people, to anyone, is going to mean something different. And that first step of getting away from this idea of, well, I have to be this to be a runner, or I have to be this to be a triathlete. I used to do a bit of part-time work in the local running shop, and people should really support their local running shops, which is a little bit of a rant. But and the first thing, so many people used to come in, and one of the first things they would say to us is, well, I'm not really a runner. And you'd think, well, I think you might be, because you've just walked into a running shop. You know, it's a specialist running shop. You found us. There must be a reason you're here. Yeah, I'm not really a runner, but I've done, you know, park run for the last year, and I've done a few 10Ks, and I'm signed up for a half marathon. And you sort of think, well, you are a runner. It sounds like you're a runner if you're doing all those things. And helping people on that step to say, yeah, I am a runner. And that's great. That's amazing. You know, and it starts from that belief of, okay, but I'm not there yet, and I want to get somewhere, but it does take a small first step. And the further back people are, there will be people, you know, listening maybe, who think, look, I can't even walk for 5 minutes, let alone think about running. This has got nothing, this isn't for me. The further back you are, the more you have to be willing to go slowly towards where you want to get to, and also be really clear about where you're trying to get to. I think one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're getting into, they want to make a life change with physical activity, is they allow themselves to have an ambiguous target. Or, you know, I want to be fitter. I go, well, what does that mean? You know, and when we don't have a clear definition of what that means, it's very easy to just allow yourself to just coast along and not actually have a step. So one of the first things I always work on, and this is regardless of whether somebody says to me, you know, oh, look, I've got a place in the London Marathon and, you know, I can't even run for 5 minutes, or it's someone who comes in and says, I want to break 3 hours for the marathon, is we need to know where you want to go, and we need to really define that goal and make it a concrete thing of, what does that look like? We need to know why you want to achieve that. And then we need to know where you are. And then we can start to plot the journey. We can say, right, these are the steps. This is what you can do today. This is what you can do tomorrow. This is what we're hoping you'll be able to do in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is. And that's the game then, is how do we go from here to there? But we need to know where there is, and we need to know where here is. And then after that, it's just details.
So we're starting to tease out what a coach is then, and what why should somebody choose you or another coach?
Yeah, no, I think if I could have one skill set that I think I probably don't yet, I'm not quite happy with at the moment, is that sort of marketing aspect of myself and I blame it on my teaching background. In terms of, the last thing we would do as a teacher is stand around saying, hey, look at me and how great I am, and these are the things I achieve. So yeah, I think, where I think coaching adds value to people is it's about understanding all the things that go into making changes and getting a, performance, whatever that performance is, whether it is just whether it's you want to do a marathon at a certain time, or you just want to finish a marathon, or you want to finish a park run, whatever that is, that's a performance. That's a thing. It's something you're going to achieve. And what I believe a coach is able to do is help you firstly identify where you are. And I think so many people either underestimate or overestimate what they're physically capable of. And that can be a challenge, because they want, they're eager. They watch the London Marathon in April. They're inspired. They sign up for the ballot the next day. And I think it was 650,000 people in the UK said, I want a place in the London Marathon. And, the vast majority, 90% of those aren't going to get a place. But to actually say, the steps you'll need to take to get from here to finishing that race, this is what it will take. These are the challenges. This is what you'll need to be able to do. And also, there's all these other things that you may not have even thought about that, from experience, I can tell you will make a difference. It's not necessarily going to be about whether or not you're motivated to do it, because that'll come and go. It's whether or not you have the systems in place to say, right, well, this is when I'm going to do this run, and this is when I'm going to do this run, and this is how I'm going to organize my life around dropping the children off at school and getting to work and so on. So I'll typically say to people, well, what time slots have we got where you can regularly train? And I say, well, I've got an hour before work, on a Monday. Okay, well, what does that look like? Well, I get up, I'd have some breakfast, and then I leave the house at 7, and then I've got to be at work at 8. Okay, so you haven't got an hour, have you? Because you've got to get to work. Or when you get to work, you can't just walk in covered in sweat, in the rain and saying, right, I'm ready to start my day. So is there a shower at work? Well, no, there isn't. Okay, well, where are we going to do that? And it's those little things that actually make or break people's preparation for things that they don't think about. So I think there's that element of it. There's the element of trying to be a calm constant for people, because they're really enthusiastic, and then they go on this roller coaster of, I'm really, really keen on it. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to do loads and loads of training. And then after a week, that starts to fade. And then after 3 weeks, they've got no motivation, and it's all too much, and they're not going to be able to do it. And they've not trained for 3 days, and the world's ending. And trying to be that far more sort of linear approach of, look, this is where we're going. Just come back to where we are. Let's bring it back down to actually stating facts, because people emotions start running high, and it's like, let's deal with the actual facts. They suddenly their knee hurts or their foot hurts, and well, my foot hurts, and therefore I'm not going to be able to do the marathon. Well, the marathon's in 3 months. We've got a pain in your foot. Let's stick with what's reality. And they're the things that I didn't think coaching was about when I got into it. I went and did a master's degree in exercise physiology and learned all these wonderful things about energy systems and muscle fiber types and so on. And then realized that the vast majority of coaching isn't anything to do with any of that. It's about behavior management and trying to help people, psychology and so on. One of the women who I've coached for a number of years, I spend probably more time speaking to her about sports psychology than anything at all. And she did the London Marathon this year, and she's a sports psychologist. That's her job. And yet I'm spending time talking to her about sports psychology as a physiologist. And yet so for me, that's what coaching is it's where's the value? What am I adding? What does this person need from me?
And I think what you're pointing to there is that I think most of us limited by our own belief systems.
Absolutely.
So we're limited by our emotions, by our self-doubt. And it's just unlocking that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I think for some people that's almost all we're ever doing is just saying, what's the conversation happening? And as we develop as, relationship as coach athlete, we start to have conversations where they will say things that they think that they probably don't ever tell anybody else. I can't do this because, but I'm always someone who does it. And one thing that they probably will all complain about, with me is I won't let things like that slide. If you say something like that, then I'm going to question you on it. I'm going to challenge you on it, because I think they're the things that actually make a massive difference. So many people are very, very quick to say, yes, but I can't do that because, okay, well, let's really get into that. Why do you believe that? What's making you say that? And the conversations we have with ourselves are you're always listening when you speak to yourself. So you've got to be really careful about allowing yourself to build a narrative of, I can't do that because, or it's not fair because, or whatever it is. And that's where we really start to get into it. And other times it's dealing with things like, obviously a lot of the people that I coach want to do more. Am I doing enough? I want to do more. I want to be better. I don't want to run 8 miles today. I want to run 12 miles today because I feel like that's what I need to do. And it's telling them to, no, just hold back. We don't need to do that. We don't know. We can come back. So the challenges are very big. It always comes back to that idea of, where's the value for that person? What am I adding to that person? And that's, the joy of the job, really.
Yeah. And I guess helping people be objective, with you talking, is making me remember the kind of very basic psychology that it's always thoughts that lead to emotions, and those emotions lead to actions.
Yeah,
and we need to really dig down beneath what people's thoughts are underneath emotions, don't we? And too often, all of us don't even reflect ourselves about what those thoughts are.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that's, with like the mindset movement and people really say, the mindset, this is something that's really, I think to be a good endurance athlete, and I don't mean that from what's your performing, what's your time. Tell me your time and I'll tell you whether you're a good endurance athlete, because I could show you someone and knowing physiology and testing people in the lab and things like that and looking at people's physiology. I know people who achieve amazing running performances who, if they were able to control their emotions and thoughts, would be able to achieve even greater things. And I know people whose physiology is way more average, and yet they're so able to control the negative thoughts, to see thoughts as what they are. That's a thought. And I can choose to interact with it, or I can choose to just let it go. It's there, but I don't need to react. I can actually choose and control that. And the way I got to that was through endurance sports, because that was just the way that I sort of got into that mindset. And that's not the only journey. Other people might do it by actively seeking, mindset practices or breathing practices, whatever it is. But I think it's certainly a vehicle for teaching people those skills. And again, that was certainly nothing I thought I was ever going to be involved in. And yet they're the conversations I have with people that I coach that I suspect, when you see them years later, that's how I still use that. And they might still use that whether they're running or they're in the office and somebody said something they don't like. And they think, well, actually, that skill of, I don't need to react to that. I can at least take a second. And injury is always the big one for athletes. The numbers on the percentages of runners that get injured every year. It's somewhere around like 50 to 75 to 80%, depending on what you classify as an injury and how you go about reporting and so on. But that's a lot. That's really, really high. And if almost everyone who I coach, if you say to them, what would be your biggest fear? It's, I don't want to get injured. Anything but injured. And so often when they get a pain or an ache or something, that didn't feel quite right. The first thing my job is to do is say, okay, let's just calm. let's just stop. No matter what it is, there's nothing we can do right now which is going to be effective. The first thing we need to do is actually try and work out what this is, and whether this is something we need to make an adjustment with. But being able to put that brake on for them, because instantly their thoughts go spiraling off. This means I won't be able to train. This means I won't be able to do this. And for a lot of them, they understand the importance of exercise for them as something that helps them go about their day. That actually, if that suddenly gets taken away, well, actually, I don't feel great when I don't get to do some exercise and so on. So it's a big thing, and that's probably one of the biggest challenges of the job is that feeling of, you're setting somebody a training session, you think, oh, I hope it will go okay. And I hope they're able to carry on doing it, because the last thing you want is to be saying to people, actually, we need to stop right now. And that does very, very, touch wood, very occasionally happen. That the only thing we can do if we get a stress reaction or something like that is to stop. We need to find a different thing we can do. But it's, that's the big, one of the big challenges really is trying to help people through that, because it is, as you say, the emotions start and the thoughts start and everything's really bad.
I'm interested to take a little bit of a step back as well, because why did I invite you in the first place? I should answer that question because of your thoughts about how you're going to impact people. I'm just frightened really about how inactive we are as a population. So first of all, I think it's worth noting that activity has a huge impact on our health, mental health and physical health. So such that if you're inactive, which is 30 minutes of moderate intensity activity 5 days of the week, if you don't achieve that, there's huge increases in the chance of you developing several cancers, heart disease, strokes, high blood pressure, Alzheimer's. The list is really quite long, such that 1 in 6 deaths are attributable to inactivity. So for me, activity is a key tool in preventing people ever developing problems and also with tackling those problems. So why then invite you? I think because you've been really key in a number of people's lives to increase their levels of activity. And I think that has 2 effects. One, obviously, directly on the person. And if we're talking about somebody who is going to do an ultramarathon because of the work you've done, well, maybe actually it doesn't increase their lifespan compared to them where they were already. But the number of people they inspire and how that brings up the population as a whole is really significant. So I think there's one level, the work that you do with elite people and how you teach them the psychological skills that they will then also impart on other people. It's a real ripple effect, isn't it? And I guess I wanted to squeeze that out, which you already have, and how really some of the psychological awareness that you're talking about is applicable to everyday life, isn't it? And how actually the best leaders do exactly what you're saying in terms of, winning that, completing the marathon or improving your time. The best leaders employ the same skills in their day-to-day life. So I think it's that. And then also I'm really intrigued as to, how you interact with people who are basically inactive and you've turned their life around. You've reduced their chances of dying from one of these irreversible diseases by around 30%. This is huge, right? This is more than anything I can do. So just to put things in perspective, if I treat somebody with a statin medication, I've probably got to treat 30 people if I'm going to prevent 1 heart attack.
Wow.
For every person that you make active from inactive, you're probably, reducing their chances of something significant by at least a third.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's, I know when we spoke about organising the podcast, I said that the statistics in terms of inactivity and what that means are, because it's just not something that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. It's not, they're not the things that I'm thinking, sitting at home and reading about and looking at those numbers, but I'm aware that we've got, it doesn't take a lot other than watching the news to realise that there is a huge problem with how the health service operates in terms of being under pressure of dealing with diseases, which we can quite clearly, I was thinking on it after you emailed, and I thought, I'm going to ask Nick if he can tell me any drug or treatment or anything which would have an effect similar to exercise. in terms of, I thought, if there was a paper that was released and said that there's this wonder drug or whatever it is, and it's able to do all these things, would that get published? Or would someone say, there's just no way that there's something that can do all that that's also effectively free of charge?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just try and rise to that challenge. I think, first of all, let's not forget that we're talking about prevention. So a lot of drugs we use are to treat. Yeah. And there are some drugs that are going to make, a huge difference between survival and not. Mm-hmm. And be that, I don't know, a medication that dissolves a clot if you're having a heart attack, mm-hmm. or you've got a clot in your leg. Even antibiotics, I'd argue we use them too much. So the percentage is diminishing even with antibiotics because we use them so often. Well, actually, I think we'd get better without them. But if we look to preventative drugs, I suppose the closest are the weight loss drugs.
Okay.
And actually, they're really good at losing weight. But let's not forget that inactivity is a bigger cause of death than obesity. Yeah. So if you're active and obese, you're safer than thin and inactive. So obviously it's better to have a good weight and active, of course, but I think activity is more important even than those drugs. What other preventatives? I've talked about statin medications. I suppose aspirin is a preventer of heart attacks, but actually the evidence is that it is more likely to cause like a bleed from your stomach than prevent a heart attack if you haven't had a heart attack yet.
Okay.
So even then, so we're scraping the barrel.
Yeah. And I think that's I remember reading an article a few years ago which made a big argument about, look, stop saying that exercise is medicine. Medicine is medicine and exercise is something different, or activity, and so on. And I think that's I think that area is something that we need to acknowledge there's a difference there, but the ability to have a dramatic effect on your health by being active is so almost abundantly clear that the question I then have is, okay, well, why isn't it sticking? If I don't, I'm not at the forefront of treating patients and so on, so I don't get to have those conversations with people who are inactive and say to them, look, you do know we could probably really make a dramatic effect on all these things that you're seeing me about if we could get you to do these. So if those conversations are happening, why is it not getting across? Why is that not? And I think that's the challenge then.
I agree. So just to put some context there, I suppose, firstly, we don't see the majority of the population that would benefit from being more active, I guess, because they're coming. If I tell somebody that activity would help them, I know that about 1 out of 8 of them would be more active. Okay. So that's better than a lot of drugs anyway. Me just saying. Yeah. So we try to. But I think, what about the 7 and 8 that aren't? That's what interests me. And I think that is because of the time and skill that people like you have got, right? So that's why you're here today. I was really interested to listen to the steps that you were thinking about. So, identifying where you are, that takes time, doesn't it? What's your starting point? Identifying your goals. And then the other things you were saying is holding people to account, challenging them, be the constant. That takes real time, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, and I remember, I said to you before we started recording, and I had a conversation yesterday with a guy I coach who's a physio, and he said, look, I get 10 minutes. And he knows as well as I do that I'm the world's worst at keeping to a time thing on a conversation. So, when I first meet with clients, I might go in, so the intention really is to be here for about an hour. We'll have a cup of coffee together and we'll just start to work out how we're going to work together, what the goal is and what we're going to do. And sort of 2.5 hours later, we're still sitting there and we're talking about it, because the layers start to come away as you start getting there, and what they first think is the goal suddenly changes and so on. And then the ability to check in with them on it. So when I coach people, I wanted to have some level of what does the person need? And for some people, they need somebody every day to be checking in with them and saying, are we doing this? Because their lives, they have jobs where things might change. So they might think they're going to go for a run that evening, but then a meeting overruns. So what are we going to do the next day? Do I now do the run that I was supposed to do today, or do I move something else, or do I do an hour run, or do I now do whatever? So there are some people I coach who it is a daily interaction, and they may be people as well who have dealt with injuries previously. So we're having to go through a system of building up their running in reaction to what signals they're getting back from their body. I ran for half an hour and I felt knee pain at a level of 2 out of 10. Okay, well, what should we do tomorrow then? Okay, well, at that sort of level, we would probably try and do, maybe 30 minutes again. So they might need that level of interaction. And then other people I coach, I will check in midweek. They'll do some training Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll send a message on Wednesday, check in, see how things are going. What's the rest of the week going to look like? And then we'll check in again on the Sunday. And that's all they need as that constant of, that twice a week. And I'm absolutely well aware there is no way that can happen with, a physio, a GP or whatever. The numbers are just, the scale of it is completely different. And that's, when you say about how I organize my business around life and other things that I'm doing, is that's just the structure of the company that I run, is that I couldn't do that if I had 50 people that I was coaching. There's no way that would be sustainable, or what would happen is it would become diluted. And one of the reasons I stopped teaching was after our son was born. I'd always been someone who when I started teaching, was time was not a thing. I didn't say to people, well, at 5:30, that's it, you're all going home, get out, I'm done. Time says I have to finish at 5:30. Away we go. It's the cricket net overruns. We do Saturday morning fixtures and stand around and be there, till mid-afternoon. After our son was born, that changed. And I would start finding myself looking at the watch and thinking, I can't want to go home now, actually. I've got a 6-month-old at home. And that was one of the drivers to say, no, I don't want to do this. I don't like that. I don't like that feeling of, I'm supposed to be here with you and helping you develop your sporting ability. This is your time as a student, but actually I'm mentally already checking out and wanting to go home. So I just, said, I don't, there's probably another way we can live that isn't that. And the same applies now with the coaching business. I think if I suddenly had 50 people ring me up after I'd been on a podcast saying, oh, quick, I need you to coach her. I need you to coach her. That wouldn't be feasible, because I know what would happen is, as the business has grown, and the woman I told you about, who was the sports psychologist, I had one athlete that I was coaching. And if you've ever, there's nothing quite like having a small business and telling people you're a sports coach, and they say, oh, who do you coach? I've got one person. And you just think, and that, again, that's the journey. That resonates then with, okay, well, I want to be a sports coach. I want to have a business where I'm working with a group of people and we're trying these amazing things that we want them to achieve. But it starts with one person, because until you've got one person, you can't have two. And until you've got two, you can't have four. And then it does grow. And again, if you want to run a 10K and you can't yet run one, then it has to be one before you can do that. And you have to just be willing to accept it takes time.
So I'm keen to explore goal setting, because you identified that as one of the key things. I'm used to hearing things about SMART goals.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've been convinced away from them a little bit. So I'm keen to hear your take on goal setting and how you define it.
The GCSE PE teacher in me is delighted to hear that. I think they've moved on to SMARTer now. I think they've added on a few letters as these acronyms tend to grow, don't they? And then we start chopping things out. And I think, if the woman I coach is the sports psychologist, she'll be terrified to hear me talking about like specific names for things like goal setting and so on, because she's probably got this long list and all these papers into looking at different levels of it. And that's where I think there's a crossover between understanding theory and understanding the application of it. So I don't tend to work through a set of like, right, we need to make it specific. We need to make it measurable. It's more a case of how does this person function with a goal? Don't even know that that's a goal and going from, or is it just, a dream? And for me, the difference is, a dream is something that you think about and think that would be nice. And the goal is, well, this is something I'm going to do. And now the challenge is to work out how I'm going to get there. That's then a goal. You can have as many dreams as you like. The dreams, dream away. And that's one of the things that I think people probably don't do enough of. Dream away. Think about everything you like. But once it's time to say, right, this is a goal now, then it's time to say, but how do I get there? And also, one of the things I speak to a lot with people who I coach is, are you willing to pay the cost of achieving that goal? Because we like to think about the good parts of doing something. I'm going to be someone who's going running and it'll be great and so on. But do you know there's a cost involved? And can I help you measure that cost and check that actually you're willing to pay that cost? So if you're willing to get up at 6 o'clock to go for a run first thing in the morning, are you willing to go to bed at 10 o'clock at night? Because if you're not, then that's actually, going to be a problem. because what's going to happen is you're just going to end up tired. And when you end up tired, you're either going to miss sessions, or we might get injured, or we might get ill, or you might get stressed. And that's part of the job as well. And I think that's key to goal setting, is once you say what the goal is, we need to work out what's the investment that needs to go into that. And that to me is how I help people build a goal. And partly that just comes from the experience of working with different people who had similar goals. And sometimes it's saying to people, I don't know how we're going to achieve that yet, but these are the things I've done with other people that might work. So I work with a woman who's an ultra runner, and she was just done the South Downs Way 100, which obviously is a run from Winchester to Eastbourne, and over the most ridiculous hills. And when she said, I want you to help me work towards this, I instantly was like, I have no idea how to help somebody prepare to do a 24-hour race. I even thought of racing for 24 hours. But I have helped people do other things which are just a challenge. And it's about saying, okay, right, well, we need to go through that process. And that's really how I think goal setting can be the most useful for people, is about helping them realize, how we craft the goal, and also how we make the goal reality. Because it can't just be something you think you'd like to do. It has to actually, you have to be aware of how that can happen and what it will look like for that to happen.
So what I'm hearing from you is you almost commit some dreams, write your dreams down, express your dreams, and set some goals that are on that trajectory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that, the word commitment and acceptance of the challenge is really, really big. And it was the woman I coached, a sports psychologist, we were talking about acceptance of challenges when she was praying for the London Marathon. She said that really resonates with me. A lot of the sports psychology work I do, we look at acceptance commitment theory. And I said, I didn't know that's what it was called, but that sounds a lot like what I'm talking about, which is that, okay, this is going to be hard. And that's a key element of it. Is, I think for a lot of people, the message is often, oh, it's okay. It won't be that hard. It won't be that hard. And actually it's like, well, no, it will be hard. It is going to be hard. You're trying to do something which is going to be hard, but that's okay. It's okay that it's going to be hard. It's okay that you're going to think, I don't want to get off the sofa. I want to sit here. I want to watch another episode of what I'm watching. This is nice. Out there's cold and wet, and I don't really want to go. And that's okay. We can build you up to being someone who does that. And I think that's one of the things I always ask people to commit to when we train together is, if you really, really don't want to do a session, can we start? Go and do the start of the session. And if it's supposed to be a 45-minute run or a 50-minute run, can we do the first 5 minutes? And if you really don't want to continue, turn around, go home. That's it. You've done 10 minutes. Now, if people just did that, we're already on the way to getting 5 by 30, just by doing, and I know the statistic of like, it has to be 10 minutes to even count. Like, I think they might have moved away from that, haven't they, in terms of, quantifying what does and doesn't count as physical activity. But the 5-minute thing didn't come from, oh, well, if I do that, then at least we can tick the box of, they're being physically active. It came from my experience of so often what the reason you don't want to go is because you're thinking about what you will feel like when you're running. And you think, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to go out, I'm going to start running, and I'm just going to hate every single second of it. The whole time I'm out there, I'm just going to want to go home. And so often when you are running, that isn't what happens. You start to think, well, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. That's normally the process. This isn't as bad as I thought. Well, if I do 2 more minutes, then at least I'll have done 14. Oh, hold on, that escalated quickly. And then, well, if I'm going to do that, I might as well run to the end of the road. And then by the time you do that, you're over that barrier. And the starting thing is because what you're doing is you're reacting to that emotion of, I'm going to hate this when I'm there. And I love what I'm doing right now. And just talking to you about that is, like one of the challenges with autism is what they call autistic inertia, which is that feeling of wanting to continue what you're doing, whatever it is. So if you put our son in front of a book, he's sitting and he's reading. If it's dinner time, that process of going, look, stop the book and come and have dinner is one of the biggest challenges we face each day. But there's lessons there, not only into how you can relate to autism and people with autism in terms of understanding how they feel about things like that and why it's a challenge for them, but also, that feeling of, oh, I don't really want to go to the pool and swim, or I don't really want to go out and walk. I want to stay doing what I'm currently doing, even though I know that's not the best thing for me. Even though I know sitting for 4 hours at a time is one of the worst things I could possibly do if I've got, challenges like diabetes and so on. I need to do it, but I don't really want to. And if we can overcome that and get moving, then that inertia of, well, now I can just keep moving because I'm already doing it now. And then if we need skills to continue, then we put those in place as well. How do we do that? But one of the messages I'd be really keen to get across to people who aren't physically active, if they know someone who is they're not different to you on that mental level, other than the fact they've got some skill set that allows them to get, so many people who I work with, myself as well, we have those moments of, I don't want to do this. And they're able to overcome that. They're able to get out the door and get going. And if you can do that as well, you'll be really surprised at actually what happened. And suddenly, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, you're somebody that someone who's inactive knows, who they think, I don't know how he does that. And that's really empowering.
Yeah. And so I guess, find a dream that is going to drive you out of the short-term comfort into the longer-term benefit, and find somebody who'll help you find some goals that are realistic to you with the acceptable downsides to them.
Yeah, that's it. And that's, I think who that person is may well be a professional who's a coach. It may be a friend. It may be whoever. But it's hard. It is hard to do it entirely on your own to begin with. The person who got me into running, he wasn't doing it for any purpose of his own, other than the fact he quite liked talking about running. So I think he thought, well, if you start running, we can have a chat about that. But it was just what it was. But it started me off on it, and then that meant that both my brother and my sister, who had never run in any form of terms of, I want to go out and exercise or whatever. My sister's done the London Marathon twice now. My brother's done the Beachy Head Marathon twice now. I should mention my sister's also done the Beachy Head Marathon, otherwise she'll kill me. And they're things that would never have happened had I not started running. None of us had ever expressed any desire to go and run. And that can be really powerful effect on others. So it may well be that one of the reasons that people set a goal of being more active is because they've got children that they want to be more active. That may be the goal for you. What I want to do is I want to show my children what you can do. And so many people who I work with, that's one of the reasons that they want to take on challenges, is they want to inspire their children to say, I don't think I can do this. Now watch me. And that's magic. That's the thing. And that's really the thing that makes the job the best thing I can imagine doing, because you get to be part of that. You get to see, everyone gets to see the Instagram picture of them with the medal, and everyone gets to click like and say, oh, you're fantastic, you're amazing, I don't know how you do it, and so on. And I get to say, yeah, I know how you do it. I know the struggle. I know that bit 6 weeks ago when you said, oh, I can't do this, what are we doing? We've got no chance. And that's,
I must say, I think social media is a double-edged sword there, isn't it? Because you only see the achievement, you see the end goal or the dream, and not the fact that they've really fought tooth and nail to get there, and it's been a struggle, and you two can achieve it.
I think I was very lucky when I started running, in that there was nothing. There was no social media, no Strava. It's just the app where people upload all the training and stuff they've been doing, and they're comparing themselves to everyone else, because that's what we do as humans, compare. And no matter what you do, there will always be someone faster. There'll always be someone who's started running just a year ago, and now they're running faster than you, and you've been running for 10 years. And that must mean there was none of that. Literally all I had was, I would go into work at school every day, and the guy who was the deputy head would say, have you run this morning? And I was like, no, I'm going to run tonight. And I had no intention of running that evening. But the next day, did you run last night? No. And that was it. But I had no idea about what was or wasn't possible. I had no issue with dealing with what's the right sort of training. I think so many people get hung up on, I don't know what to do. Okay, so you're telling me that I should be more physically active, and that's great. Okay, right, here's my goal then. I want to run a 5K, but I don't know how to do it. Okay, well, whatever you do, don't start listening to loads of different pieces of advice, because what will happen is there will be someone doing something different. And then you'll think, well, what I'm doing is useless. And you don't have that base of confidence to ignore what everyone else is doing. And that's, even we're watching people at the Olympics who will have had to counteract hearing what other people are doing. And they're like, well, they have to trust the training they've done. Oh, but, the athletes from Norway have done this, and the athletes from America are doing this, and I haven't ever done that. And that just trickles all the way down. That trickles all the way down to people who I coach who are training for an Ironman. Well, my friend's doing an Ironman, and he's already done a 20-mile run, and we've only done a 12-mile run. I think I need to do a 20-mile run. And that, a lot of that comes from social media and that comparison. And whether I'd have had the confidence to build up my training when I first started running, I literally was like, well, I guess I just need to run more. And that's what I need to do. I signed up to do Beachy Head Marathon. And obviously people who know it locally, it's pretty much don't do that as your first marathon, because there's a lot of hills. And I just didn't really do, much training. And then I finished. And people said, oh, what was your time? I said, five and a half hours. And so people are, oh, okay. And it's really hilly. It's really hard. And then, oh, no, that's good. Well done, you. And you're like, oh, actually, okay. Well, I thought, what can I do? I've got to go back and do another one now, even though I'd even sworn to myself a million times during the race, I'm never doing this again, because it really hurt. So, and I remember sitting at home and thinking, there must be something I can do to do that race better. And EastEnders had just finished. And I thought, if I ran every time EastEnders was on, I bet I'll be better at doing a marathon. And that was what I did. I've never watched another episode of EastEnders since, because I thought to myself, if I've got time for half an hour of EastEnders, I've probably got half an hour to run. Now people will be like, oh, habit formation and so on. And there'll be people on TikTok and Instagram or whatever telling you that this is how you do it. I didn't know that. It was just something I thought to myself, well, let's do that and whatever. So I didn't have to deal with any of that. It was just find your own way of working it out. And I think it is a challenge, because you're battling those thoughts already about whether or not this is any good. And if you start to think that what you're doing is pointless because it's not what you're seeing on social media, you will give up quite quickly.
So let's try and find some positives. Our last guest was Keith Grimes, who's a GP and a health innovator, especially in health tech. And his question to you was, what's the newest thinking on helping to motivate people to increase activity? And what do you think about AI and how that can help?
Yeah, it's, I had someone recently say to me, oh, are you concerned that everyone's going to switch to AI being their coach? I was like, shut up. Maybe I should be. Maybe I should be terrified that everyone's just going to go to, and I think there will be people that will do that, and wearables and so on, and the coaching in inverted commas that they get from their wearable. I think it's going to help a lot of people if that's what they need. If their watch tells them to go and run, and they go and run because the watch tells them to do it, that's great. There will be some people who we need to understand how AI or tech works or whatever. And it's basically working on this is what we think your response to this will be. And, my argument against that would be, anyone who's ever looked at any scientific study of, we took 50 runners and we put them on this running training program, and these were the results. The average increase in 5K time was a minute or whatever. Look at the actual data, and there's that little dot that's the person got worse. Now, the average person got much better, and the average person might get much better just listening to their watch. But there's someone who didn't. And so how do we help that person? Because if what they do is get an AI training program and it doesn't work for them because it's not what they need, what they're probably going to do is think, oh, well, I'm different. It doesn't work for me. I'm not built for this. I'm not built to be a runner. That's why I get injured. Everyone else should be able to do it. That's what the tech is saying I should be able to do. So yeah, I don't necessarily feel sort of defensive against the idea of, we're going to, move to this system where there's this super, and I'm sure there are people who will benefit massively from that, mostly because I'm a strong believer in how effective the belief system is in how well something works. So if they genuinely believe that this is going to work for them, that this it must work for me. It's a computer and it's based on all this amazing information. There's no way I can have as much information as some supercomputer. Then great. There's a chance it will work for them. Yeah. And there'll be people who it won't necessarily work for, and that's fine. And there will be people who will always value a person who's at the end, who's willing to listen to, oh, how did your run go? Well, let me tell you 10 minutes about how my day was first. And then we'll talk about how my run went. And you think, okay, that's fine. So yeah, I suppose that's how I think about the tech revolution. If it means more people are doing it because they've got, a system they've spent money on and they like and whatever, great. More people active, and I suppose for me as a business owner, the more people that are running, the more people there are that will want running coaches. So if they're stepped into running as their Apple Watch telling them what to do, great, fine, no problem. And then, if they then get to a point where they think, actually, I want a person now, then,
I've not come across technology that's amazing at motivating. I think that's a human.
Yeah,
thing,
I think the motivating is excuse me, it's such an interesting thing, because I think motivation is something that I see probably differently to how other people who aren't physically active, they think it's something they need. I just need to get motivated. That's why if I could just find something that gets me motivated. And I see the downside of motivation quite a lot with the people that I work with, because they're motivated to do well, and therefore they make decisions which aren't necessarily the best interest in it for where they're going to. So that element of, I'm motivated to do well, so I'll do more. And it's like, well, actually, that doesn't work. But I'll also see the downside of it of there's somebody who was motivated last week, and then this week they're not motivated anymore. And what we get is this massive fluctuation in their levels of training, where again, it comes back to that constant of, well, no matter how motivated you are, we need to stay on what the plan is. And when you're not motivated, we still need to stay on the plan. Mm-hmm. And it's just come back to the path. You can, I always sort of liken it a little bit to if you're walking through a high street. I say you're walking through the high street to get to the train, you can window shop, but then, you can't stop. That's when there's no motivation. I just can't do it. I'm just going to stop here and sit and have a coffee. And you can't get too excited and start marauding around the shops, looking at things. What's the goal? Where are we working towards? And what's the steps to getting there? So I think there's the whether or not, somebody, I'm sure there will be studies into whether or not somebody telling somebody to do something is more motivating than a watch beeping that says time to work out or whatever it is. And there's in the endurance sports community, there's always a laugh about the fact that some of these watches have move detectors. And if you don't move, they'll beep to tell you to move, which I can see the application with people who aren't physically active, but they don't necessarily detect that they've just been for a 3-hour bike ride. So they go out, they do a 3-hour bike ride, they sit on the sofa, they've just eaten some lunch, and then suddenly the watch tells them to move. And now, they'll tweet about how funny that is that the watch is now telling them to move. The efficacy of that with people who are inactive, I don't know. It's just because, again, it's not an area that affects me as a coach in that sense. And I think that's so, whether or not they are motivating or demotivating, I know like brands where they have target movement, numbers and target calorie usage and things like that. I know they exist. I would suggest the evidence is if we're having that many people inactive, then they're obviously not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And whether that is then goes the other way to actually being demotivating because people are failing or they perceive they're failing
all the time. I think for listening to you, I think that's the motivation is probably around get motivated to dream, get motivated to set some realistic goals and forget about the motivation in achieving those goals, because then you need to actually set them in a realistic way. I
think that's it. I think we don't rely on motivation for so many things in our life. People go to work every single day and they don't require a huge amount of motivation. It's just, this is what I do. I get up and I go to work. I've got to feed myself, or I've got to feed the family or whatever. This is what I do. I've got to make dinner. I'm not going to say I'm necessarily motivated to make dinner. So let's not put it on a pedestal of, if I could just be motivated, then I'd be able to do this. I said, okay, well, let's strip that, because that's a barrier then, because I need motivation to get out the door to go and exercise. So, okay, well, if you don't need motivation, then you just go out the door and exercise. It's just what you do. And so many people I work with, that is, it's what they do. They build their lives around it. And one of the one of the big things I talk about, and then the EastEnders thing was sort of an example of that is, when people say, I don't know how you find the time. I don't know how you find the time to do it. It's like, well, it's not that I find the time. It's just that we try to make life choices which allow the time, but also I will only do certain things that work within our life structure. So I've done, I did an Ironman race last year, but I was starting to get aware of the fact that the time that I want to commit to this, to train at this level, is starting to become a bind now. I'm starting to find that I'm trying to squeeze things in, or I'm trying, let's just take a year off. Don't make that the goal. And that's part of goal creation. Someone says to me, oh, I really want to do a marathon. I'm not the gatekeeper to the London Marathon, but so many of those people who applied for the ballot, if you said to them, show me where that's going to fit in your life, preparing for that. Well, I don't think it realistically would. And that's difficult then, because that might be the thing. It inspires so many people to do it. Then there's people crossing that line who would never have done it had they not got into that race. But there's also so many people who says, well, actually, can we do something else, which is a goal, which is actually achievable, that works within your life, so that you're not finding time. What you're doing is you're making it a priority. And that's how, I think that idea of, well, I make physical activity a priority. I put it high on my list, and it is very, very high on my list, because it's something that is part of our life, and that's it.
Yeah. So prioritize physical activity to be, just a routine part of your life. I think that's a really good take home message. So the next guest is a wellbeing therapist, Rita Minas-Judd. And we're going to be discussing how to live your best life. So this kind of ties in a little bit.
Yeah.
So do you have a question for her that I can pass on?
Yeah. One of the reasons I listened to the previous podcast, I thought, I'm going to try and get a feel for what this is, the competitive person in me. It's that element of, right, if I can get a feel for what sort of guests are you having? Can I think of a question that's really insightful and so on? A wellbeing therapist. Okay. How to live your best life. Let me think. I think I'd say I'll ask. If she could have something she has a question about in terms of, is this effective? Does this actually make a difference? But we don't know the answer to it. So there's loads of things, that you think, we think this might be effective. We think this might be helpful. We don't know, but we think, what would be the one thing that she doesn't currently know that she thinks, if I knew that, definitely works. If I could make it very binary of yes, no, that works, that doesn't work. What one thing would she like a definitive answer on in her field of helping people live their best life? I think that'd be interesting to hear.
So just to clarify that, what one thing for any individual?
Yeah. So for example, I suppose I'll put it in my field, and then hopefully that'll clarify. Is we talk about things like strength training for runners. So, strength training. Do you need to strength train, to be a better runner? And then you get studies and different people doing different things. And there's no real definitive answer. Yes, you absolutely have to. And I would be like, that would make my life so much easier as a coach. If I knew people had to do it, I could just say, I don't need to think about it. I don't need to, that's because you're constantly trying to weigh up the benefits and so on. So I wonder if in the element of, is it goal setting, for example, do we have to have people set goals to live their best life? And it should obviously be way more into the knowledge base of her particular area than me. So I wonder if there's something which is it's a big question in that field that would be nice to have a definitive answer.
Yeah, interesting. I will place that to her. I've got questions that I won't keep as closed, but is it just talking to people? Is it being vulnerable? Is it what is it? Okay, thank you.
Great.
I will pass that on. Thanks very much for sharing your enthusiasm and your time.
Thank you.
And I look forward to hearing the responses from listeners on this, and see how many more customers. See if we get your 50.
No, I don't need that. I don't want to. But I think even if there's what would be really, really nice, even if they're not looking for a coach, if anybody listened and then thought, I'm going to go and do something, feel free to send me an email and just say, look, this is what I did, because that'll be enough for me.
Yeah, thanks very much. So take homes for me are dream big, set some realistic goals, ignore the noise, and get some support to really hold you to account for some realistic goals. I can really see the value of a coach and the value that you bring to people. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to the Health and Wellbeing podcast about the benefits of physical activity and how it can improve your health and wellbeing. with Jason Newbery and me, Dr. Nick Harvey. For more information and resources, check out our website, sdhc.org.uk. If you have any feedback or suggestions for future episodes, please email us at sdhc.feedback@nhs.net. Tune in to our next episode where we'll be interviewing Rita Minas-Judd on how to live your best life. Please take a moment to subscribe to help support us in supporting others with their health and well-being.